Security in the Middle Ages was a simple idea. It was about keeping things in and keeping people out. Castles had big walls and moats. Homes had strong doors. And on those doors, or on chests full of valuables, you would find a lock. But these were not the locks we know today. They were different. They were products of a different world, a world of iron and fire. The main type of lock used for centuries was the warded lock. The concept was straightforward. Inside the lock's iron case, there were fixed obstacles. These were called wards. Think of them like a small, simple maze built inside the lock. The part that actually does the locking, was on one side of this maze. To move the bolt, you needed a key. The key was not just a random piece of metal. It had to be designed to navigate the specific maze of wards inside its matching lock. The end of the key, called the bit, had slots and cuts in it. These cuts corresponded perfectly to the wards. When you put the key in and turned it, the empty spaces in the key's bit would pass around the solid wards. The solid parts of the bit would miss the wards entirely. If the key was correct, it could turn freely and engage the bolt, sliding it open or closed. If it was the wrong key, one of the wards would block it from turning. The path would be blocked. It was a clever system for its time. It was purely mechanical and relied on a unique physical shape. This meant that, in theory, only the one correct key could open the lock. Your key for your money chest would not open your neighbor's. This provided a basic level of security that was good enough for most situations. The materials were what you would expect from the era. Iron was the standard. A smith would forge the lock case, the bolt, and the wards from iron bars heated in a coal forge. For the very wealthy, a lord or a high-ranking church official, locks might be made of bronze or brass. These metals did not rust and could be decorated more easily. But for most people, security was made of dark, heavy iron. The keys themselves were a big deal. They were not small and light, like the keys on our keychains today. A medieval key was often large, heavy, and made of iron or bronze. It was a substantial object. Carrying a key signaled that you had something important enough to lock away. It was a status symbol. Some keys were very plain, just functional tools. Others were incredibly ornate. The bow, the part you hold, might be shaped like a clover, a cross, or a complex geometric pattern. They were works of art in their own right, a testament to the skill of the smith who made them. Unlike today, where millions of identical locks are produced in a factory, every medieval lock was unique. Each one was made by hand. A locksmith would create a lock and then make a key to fit it. This one of a-kind nature was a core part of its security. There was no master key system. There was no factory that could look up a serial number and cut you a new key. If you lost your key, you had a serious problem. You have to call the smith, and he would likely have to destroy the lock to open it. So the world of medieval locks was built on this simple principle of physical obstruction. A unique key for a unique lock. It was a system born from the anvil and the hammer, a direct and physical approach to the age-old problem of keeping your possessions safe. It was not perfect, but in a world without power tools or advanced metallurgy, it was a remarkable piece of engineering. It was security forged in fire. The heart of medieval locksmithing was the smith's workshop. It was not a quiet or clean place. It was a place of soot, sweat, and the constant ringing of metal on metal. The locksmith was a specialized type of blacksmith. He might have been part of a blacksmith's guild, a respected craftsman with a very particular set of skills. His job was not just to make nails or horseshoes. His job was to create security. Imagine walking into his workshop. The air would be thick with coal smoke from the forge, a hearth where the fire burned incredibly hot. A large bellows, often operated by an apprentice, would feed air to the fire, making it roar. In the glowing heart of the forge would be a piece of iron heated until it was yellow-white. The smith, a man with strong arms and hands calloused from heat and labor, would use a long pair of tongs to pull the glowing metal from the fire. He would move it quickly to the anvil, his main work surface. The anvil was a massive block of iron, the center of his craft. And then the hammering would begin. The sharp, rhythmic clang of his hammer striking the hot iron would fill the air. He was not just banging on it randomly. Each strike was precise, purposeful. He was shaping the metal, forcing it to take the form he held in his mind. Making a lock was a patient process. First, he would forge the lock case. This was the box that would hold the mechanism. He would hammer flat a piece of iron, then bend it, fold it, and forge weld the seams shut. Forge welding was a difficult skill. It involved heating two pieces of metal until they were nearly molten, then hammering them together so they fused into a single piece. The result was a strong, hollow iron box. Next came the inner workings. He would forge the bolt. This was the piece that would slide back and forth to lock and unlock the door or chest. He had to make sure it moved smoothly, but did not have too much wiggle room. He would then create the wards. This was the most secretive and important part of the job. He would take small pieces of iron, heat them, and bend them into specific shapes. These shapes were his own design. He might make a circular ward, a series of straight ones, or a complex zigzag pattern. He would then fix these wards inside the lock case, riveting them or welding them into place. This pattern was the lock secret. Once the lock itself was complete, it was time to make the key. The key was made to defeat the lock he had just created. He would start by forging the basic shape of the key, the long shaft, the bow to hold it, and a solid block at the end for the bit. The real work was in filing the bit. Using a set of hand files, he would carefully cut away metal from the bit. He would have to remember the exact pattern of the wards inside the lock case. He would file a slot here to get past a straight ward, a curved opening there to get around a circular one. This was a process of trial and error. He would file a bit, then try the key in the lock. Did it turn? Did it catch on something? If it caught, he would see where it was binding, take the key back to his vise, and file away a little more metal. He would repeat this over and over until the key turned smoothly, its cutouts gliding past the wards, and the final part of the bit engaged the bolt, throwing it open. This is why no two locks were the same. The smith might not even remember the exact ward pattern he used a month ago. Each lock was a unique creation, a conversation between the smith, his tools, and the metal. The quality varied greatly. A master locksmith in a major city, working for a king or a wealthy merchant guild, would produce incredibly complex and reliable locks. His wards would be intricate, the parts would fit together perfectly, and the key would be a work of art. A village blacksmith, on the other hand, might make a cruder lock. It would still work, but the wards might be simpler, the fit a bit looser. The entire process was done by eye and by feel. There were no blueprints, no laser cutters, no computer models. It was all based on the smith's experience and skill. He was not just a laborer, he was an engineer and an artist, working with the most basic elements to create a small machine of trust and security. His workshop was not a factory. It was a studio where iron was given a purpose. As soon as someone invents a lock, someone else starts thinking about how to open it without a key. This was as true in the medieval period as it is today. Locksmithing was one side of an arms race. The other side was lockpicking, or simply breaking the lock. The locksmith had to be clever, but the thief or the spy had to be clever too. The simplest way to defeat a medieval lock was brute force. An iron lock on a wooden chest was strong, but the chest itself was often the weakest point. A person with a heavy axe or a crowbar could often splinter the wood of the chest lid long before they broke the lock. The same was true for a door. It was often easier to break the hinges or the door frame than to deal with the lock itself. Security was a system, and the lock was just one part of it. But sometimes, force was not an option. A thief wanted to be quiet. A spy needed to get in and out without leaving a trace. This is where lockpicking came in, and the warded lock, for all its simple cleverness, had a significant weakness. The wards were designed to stop the wrong key from turning, but they did not actually secure the bolt. They were just obstacles in the way. The only part of the key that did any real work was the very end of the bit, the part that physically pushed the bolt. If you could bypass the wards and get a tool directly to the bolt, you could open the lock. This led to the creation of simple lock picks. A piece of stiff wire bent at the end could sometimes be jiggled past the wards to push the bolt. But the most effective tool was the skeleton key. A skeleton key was a key that had been filed down so that only the essential parts remained. Most of the bit, the part that dealt with the wards, was removed. Only the long, thin shaft and the very end of the bit, the part that moved the bolt, were left. With a skeleton key, you did not need to navigate the maze of wards. You were simply bypassing them entirely. The thin profile of the key could slip past the wards without being blocked. Once it was fully inserted, the tip could engage the bolt and slide it open. A skilled thief might carry a set of differently shaped skeleton keys or simple picks to try on different locks. Locksmiths were not ignorant of these weaknesses. They fought back. Their side of the arms race involved making their locks more and more complex. One way was to add more wards, creating a much more complicated maze for the key to navigate. A lock with 10 wards was much harder to bypass than a lock with 2. They would also place the wards in tricky positions, making it harder to get a simple tool to the bolt. Another trick was to make the keyhole itself more complex. Instead of a simple straight slot, a smith might make a keyhole with twists and turns, or cover it with a rotating plate. This made it harder to even get a pick inside the lock, let alone manipulate it. Some locks had false keyholes to confuse a potential thief. The most skilled locksmiths created what were essentially traps inside their locks. They might add a special ward on a spring. If a lockpick pushed against it, it would snap shut, trapping the pick inside the lock. This would not only stop the thief, but also leave evidence of tampering. Other locks had intricate mechanisms where you had to push, turn, and then pull the key in a specific sequence to get it to work. These puzzle locks were a specialty of German smiths and were prized for their complexity. Some locks required 2 keys inserted into 2 different keyholes to be opened. Others had multiple bolts that shot out in different directions, making it much harder to force the door or chest lid open. And for the truly paranoid, a smith could hide the keyhole altogether. It might be concealed behind a secret panel, a piece of decorative scrollwork, or even a fake rivet head that you had to press to reveal the opening. This constant back and forth pushed the craft forward. A lock was not just a static object. It was a statement in a long-running argument between the person who wanted to keep something safe and the person who wanted to take it. Every complex ward, every hidden keyhole, was a response to a real or imagined threat. The medieval locksmith was not just a maker of objects, he was a defender, using his knowledge of metal and mechanics to build the best defense he could. His locks in the Middle Ages were not just for the front doors of castles, they were used in many different ways, on many different objects. They were a part of daily life for anyone with something to protect, from a wealthy merchant to a powerful monastery. The need for security went far beyond a simple door. The most common use for a lock was on a chest. In a time before banks as we know them, people kept their wealth at home. This meant coins, jewelry, silver plates, and important documents like deeds and charters were all stored in wooden chests, often called coffers. These chests were the medieval equivalent of a safe. They were built from thick oak planks and bound with iron straps. And at the front, they would have a large, heavy iron lock. The bigger and more ornate the lock, the more it signaled the importance of what was inside. Traveling merchants used smaller, more portable lock chests to protect their goods and money on the road. Locks were, of course, used on doors, but not every door had a lock. A peasant's hut would likely have a simple wooden latch. Locks were expensive. They were for places that held real value. The doors to a castle's treasury, a monastery's scriptorium where precious books were kept, or a guildhall's meeting room would all have strong locks. The personal chambers of a lord or lady would be locked to ensure privacy and protect personal belongings. A key to one of these rooms was a symbol of trust and access. Padlocks were also common. Unlike fixed locks built into a door or chest, padlocks were portable. They could be used to secure the gates of a town at night, to lock up a storage shed, or to fasten the chains on a drawbridge. Early padlocks were often shaped like animals or had decorative faces on them. They worked on the same warded principle, but their design allowed them to be used in more flexible ways. They were a common sight in markets, on ships, and in military camps. Locks also found their way onto furniture. A wealthy scholar might have a desk with small, locked drawers for his ink, parchment, and personal letters. A noble lady might have a jewelry box with a tiny, intricate lock made of brass or bronze. Some very elaborate pieces of furniture had secret compartments with their own hidden locks, adding another layer of security for the most valuable items. But locks were also used to control people, not just property. Shackles and manacles were a common form of restraint, used on prisoners in dungeons or on those being transported. These were essentially a type of padlock designed to be worn. The quality could vary from simple, rough iron rings to more complex devices, designed to be difficult to remove without the proper key. A more controversial and often misunderstood use of a lock was the chastity belt. While popular in fiction, the historical evidence for their widespread use in the medieval period is very thin. Most surviving examples have been shown to be creations from later centuries, made as curiosities or jokes. The idea of a husband locking up his wife before going on a crusade is more of a myth than a reality. However, the concept shows how the idea of locking could be extended from objects to people, symbolizing control and ownership. Beyond their practical function, keys and locks held a powerful symbolic meaning. Being given the keys to a city was a great honor, a symbolic act of surrender and trust. The new ruler was literally given control over the city's gates. In Christianity, St. Peter is often depicted holding the keys to the kingdom of heaven, a powerful symbol of spiritual authority. A jailer's key represented his power over his prisoners. A wife in charge of a large household would carry the keys to the pantry and storerooms, a sign of her domestic authority. So, a lock was more than just a mechanism. It was a versatile tool used to secure everything from a nation's treasure to a personal diary. It was a symbol of wealth, power, and trust. Where you found a lock, you found something that society considered valuable, whether it was gold, knowledge, or control. The medieval locksmith was a master of his craft. He worked with difficult materials and simple tools to create functional security. The warded lock he perfected was a testament to his ingenuity, and for a very long time it was enough. The warded lock dominated the world of security for over 1,000 years. It was not perfect, but it was reliable enough for the needs of the time. It continued to be the standard lock design well past the Middle Ages, through the Renaissance, and into the 18th century. The world, however, was changing. The slow, handcrafted pace of the medieval workshop was about to be replaced by something new. The Industrial Revolution brought about changes in manufacturing that the medieval smith could never have imagined. It became possible to machine parts with incredible precision. This new level of precision allowed for the invention of entirely new types of locks that were far more secure than the warded lock. The decline of the medieval style of locksmithing began in the late 1700s. An English inventor named Robert Barron created the double-acting lever tumbler lock in 1778. This lock did not use wards. Instead, it used a series of flat plates called levers. Each lever had to be lifted to a specific height by the key before the bolt could move. If any lever was lifted too high or not high enough, the lock would not open. This was a huge leap forward in security. It was much harder to pick than a warded lock. A few years later, in 1784, Joseph Bramah patented a lock that was even more complex. His lock used a series of sliders that had to be pressed to a precise depth. It was so secure that he put a challenge in his shop window, offering a large cash prize to anyone who could pick it. The lock remained unpicked for over 60 years. These new designs required the kind of precision that could only be achieved with industrial machinery. The age of the hand-forged lock was beginning to fade. The final step towards modern security came in the mid-1800s with the work of Linus Yale Sr. and his son Linus Yale Jr. They refined an ancient Egyptian concept and created the pin tumbler lock. This is the type of lock that most of us use on our front doors today. It uses a series of small pins, each divided into two parts. The key has a unique series of cuts that lift each pin pair to the exact height where the break between the two parts aligns. When all the pins are aligned, the cylinder can turn. It is a simple, elegant, and highly effective design, but one that requires mass production and precision engineering. The role of the locksmith changed as well. The medieval locksmith was primarily a creator. He was a blacksmith who forged locks from raw iron. The modern locksmith is more of a technician and a security expert. He or she installs and services high-precision manufactured devices. The focus shifted from the art of the forge to the science of mechanics. But the legacy of the medieval locksmith is still with us. He established the very idea of mechanical security. He developed the fundamental relationship between a lock and its unique key. The ornate chests, the heavy iron keys, and the clever ward patterns are a direct link to our past. They remind us that the need to keep things safe is not a modern concern. When you look at a heavy, intricate, medieval lock in a museum, you are looking at more than just a piece of old iron. You are looking at the culmination of countless hours of labor in a smoky workshop. You are seeing the physical result of a contest between the desire for security and the threat of theft. The medieval locksmith did not have advanced science or automated tools. He had fire, a hammer, an anvil, and his own skill. And with those things, he forged the very foundations of the security we often take for granted today. He was the original guardian at the gate,